This is Pondering Aloud with Danielle Roselle. I'm here today with Brad Bernstein and Renee Larson. They are my living kidney donors, and I am so excited to be here with them as it is Kidney Month, March 2026. And I think this is an important conversation to have. I'm going to be asking them the conversations that have been burning in my mind and in my heart that I don't think we often have with living kidney donors. But before we jump in and have introductions, I'm going to briefly introduce myself. My name is Danielle Roselle. I gave birth to my son in February of 2024. When I gave birth to him, I ended up having complications that led to kidney failure. I ran a search for a living kidney donor after some close friends and family were medically eliminated. That campaign was in August of 2024. And as a result of that campaign, over 90 people stepped up to learn more about becoming living donors. Brad was my first living donor. Unfortunately, 3 months after my kidney transplant, it had failed. And Renee had stepped up in November of 2025 as my second living donor. So I've had a lot of burning questions. I'm so excited to talk with them today. Before we jump in, Brad, would you give me a quick, like 20-second intro to yourself?
Sure. So Brad Bernstein, and I originally am from Dallas, Texas, and have lived in DC for 25 plus years, and have a wife and two teenage kids.
Thank you. Renee.
Yeah, I'm Renee Larson. I live in Denver, Colorado. I live with my husband and my two cats, and just met Danielle through some work that we were doing because she had lived here in Denver for a while. So met her through some connections, and really glad to be here today.
Thank you all. So these are questions that I came up with that I've been burning to ask. And these are the questions I haven't heard on podcasts, haven't heard on forums. And they are based on some of my questions, but also things that I have read on why other patients are hesitant to have, like, ask for a living donor. So, the first thing I wanted to ask you both is it was really hard for me to imagine putting somebody through pain. That's because I don't like pain myself. I try to avoid it at all costs. So, what was it? For me, it was really hard to ask somebody to go through pain for me. What was the experience like for you? And I guess I'll ask Brad to jump in first.
Um, so pain was never an issue for me. I've had prior surgeries, and 3 years ago I had foot surgery, which was a challenging recovery, and I actually couldn't really imagine that anything would be worse than that. So I really like that thought never crossed my mind. So it's funny how something that concerns one person doesn't concern another person. So for me, pain was really never something that I thought about.
Yeah, so similar to Brad, I didn't really think about that either. You always think about, yeah, surgery, there's going to be some pain, there's going to be some challenges with recovery because you just don't feel good. And, if you've had surgery before, you know that. But yeah, I think we all have different pain tolerances. So for other people out there looking for donors or thinking about a campaign, I would suggest don't take what you're feeling or what you may or may not do, or if you don't like pain, don't have that prevent you from asking others because it's totally different for all of us.
Yeah, and so just for some context, Brad and I did not know each other when he stepped up to be my living donor, where I knew Renee. And so I did end up meeting Brad before we had our transplant together. And when we were in recovery, I did I mean, we were pretty well medicated. I didn't see him in a lot of pain per se, whereas when I went to visit Renee in November when she donated, um, and I hope it's okay that I share this, Renee. You were in the hospital for a few extra
Yeah.
days because you were having a hard time urinating and you were in a lot of pain or discomfort. And it was so physically hard for me to watch it. Like, that was the hardest piece for me, was seeing you go through that. But what was that like for you?
Yeah. You always think you're going to be different. You're always like, oh, I'm not going to have any challenges. I'm really healthy. I'm going to bounce right back. So when it was taking a little bit longer, absolutely there was frustration, but I loved having you there, one, because you were such an advocate for me. You would make sure that the nurses were coming in to check on me, and you were asking questions that I didn't even think to ask. And so having you there was fantastic. And it was a blip. That's kind of how I look at it. In the whole scheme of things, yeah, there was some pain, but I had such a great support system, and so many people coming to see me and supporting me that it's kind of a distant memory now. I know it was there, but it's not anything that was traumatic that I would do it again. Let me put it that way. I would, in a heartbeat, do this all again.
Renee, talking about a blip, I think is really important because the hardest part for me was like after the pain meds had worn off, like a week into it, into my recovery, I had a hard time getting a comfortable position at night to sleep. I'm not a back sleeper. That would really be
Yeah.
best. I'm side and stomach sleeper, and I couldn't really do that so well. And so that was the hardest part for me. And it was like a good week where it was just hard for me to get comfortable at night, to not have it hurt, to be able to actually sleep comfortably. But that's a week. Like it's nothing. Like I got past that, and the benefit of donating was so much greater than having to worry about that week. Blip is the right way to put it.
Yeah. I think about it too, like Danielle, for your experience, you've had this challenge and not feeling well and being exhausted and, having to be so careful about where you go and what you do and what you eat. And like in the scheme of things for me, like to have that comparison was the piece that definitely kept me motivated through it and kept me thinking like, oh yeah, this too shall pass.
Right.
And so to be able to give you and others that opportunity to feel good the majority of the time, it was worth that time frame. And it truly is about a 3 week time frame. That's what they tell you, when we went in for surgery. Brad, I think they probably told you the same thing, was like after 3 weeks, you have a very significant change in how you feel. And it was spot on. It was like at that 3 week period, I was like, did did that even happen? Like I'm back to doing stuff I want to do. I'm eating the things I want to eat. Like it was 3 weeks is nothing.
That's exactly the timing that I had. Going into it, I had been told 2 to 4 weeks is the average recovery time before people go back to work. I work at a desk job. I'm, relatively good, like healthy in my 40s. I thought, yeah, I'll be out 2 weeks. I'll be back at work. And that was my original plan. And coming into that 2 week mark, I was like, I'm not ready to go back to work yet. I needed that extra week of rest. But after 3 weeks, I was back to normal.
Yeah, yeah.
And I'll be honest, it's interesting because, like, 3 weeks in the whole scheme of things for me in other ways is not that big of a deal. So that puts me at ease. But there was another thing that burned in me, and that's that prior to kidney disease, if someone asked me to donate a kidney, I wouldn't have likely done it. And not because I don't care, I care tremendously. It's because I'm that pain avoidant. Um, but I guess my question to you is like, what made you decide to do it?
Danielle, prior to hearing your story, I never would have thought I would have donated.
Yeah.
So it really was hearing your story. So I learned about it through emails from my synagogue, which is the synagogue where you grew up and where your parents and your sister still belong. And it was it was multiple emails that that before I kind of started really thinking about it. And it was your story of the complications that you had in childbirth, and then thinking about your son growing up without his mom, and that really impacted me. We've also experienced the benefit of transplant in our family. My wife's uncle received a heart transplant around 10, 11 years ago. Um, he's been able to see his two daughters graduate from high school and college, both of them get married, one of them become a doctor, a pediatric cardiologist of all things, and have a grandson born or a granddaughter born. None of that would have happened but for him receiving a heart transplant. And so it has really impacted us. My mother-in-law passed away when she was 54 from cancer. And my wife and I had just been married for a few years. That was devastating. And it, it, it changed our lives in that we learned what was really important.
Yeah.
And so your story really spoke to me and became really important to me to see if I could help. Although, as I've told you many times, I actually never thought that I would be selected as the donor.
Yep. For me, I had been thinking about legacy and what impact would I have on humanity. It's important to me. And, some people do it through having children, writing a book, getting into politics, discovering some sort of medical advancement or something. And I knew that likely wasn't my path. Who knows? Maybe I'll discover something in the future. But right now, it was, what is that impact? And the opportunity, and I look at it as a gift that you gave me to give in a way that I never imagined, to be able to give somebody a second chance at life, to experience the joy I've had of health and fitness and feeling good and living, quite honestly, a really enchanted life. So to be able to share that with somebody else was it's so impactful for me. And that's that to me was a huge motivator.
Yeah, legacy is important. And
Yeah.
for Brad, the piece of having that connection to family and what happened with your family is important too. And, um, it's interesting because when I ran my campaign, I was a new mom. I had a newborn son, and the stakes felt really high for me because I wasn't doing very well on dialysis. And there's a fear in me where I will likely need another transplant, even beyond the one that Renee has donated. And that when I'm older and grayer, that my story isn't going to be compelling because I no longer have a young son and, you know, not my whole life and my hot son's whole life ahead of me. So I do have this really big fear that age is going to prevent me when I'm older from having somebody step up. And I guess my question was it my story that compelled you both to step up?
So for me, it was two things. It was your story, and it was you being a member of my community, your family being a member of my community. And I think the important thing here is that talking about, where we started with you being concerned about asking people because of your fear of pain and putting someone else through that. And you didn't want to ask someone to go through that. Um, and then talking about your story and getting it out there. I think the message is that you never know who is going to receive your message and how they're going to receive it. And so you never would have expected me,
No,
right? I was never on your radar
no, no,
screen.
no.
And 20 years from now, if you need another kidney, who knows who is going to hear your story and who is going to connect with it. So for someone else out there who is going through what you went through, there is someone there who is going to connect with their story. It's a matter of finding that person.
Yeah, for sure. And for me, you introduced me to the opportunity. Your story absolutely compelling, and I knew you. I had been kind of part of the journey of you. You had just recently moved to DC. You had just gotten married. You were planning a family. So, through us staying in contact through work stuff, I knew your journey. And then when this happened and I learned about it, it was absolutely compelling. But I think the thing is, I was being evaluated when you ended up getting the transplant from Brad. And so I wasn't like, okay, I'm not going to do this anymore. I was, I'm in. I was like, great. If Danielle isn't going to be the recipient, which you may not have been anyway, I don't even know if we would have matched, but I was in. And so it was, let me donate to whoever is in need. And I think that's an important piece of what you did is you put the idea and the opportunity out there for other people to learn about. And once, potential donors have learned about it, they can end up helping somebody else if they end up not being a match for a specific person. And I think that's kind of the beauty too of people putting their campaigns out there. Not only can they help themselves, but they're helping others.
And Danielle, your story has led other people to
Yeah,
donate. From my side, my story led a few people to get tested. So, you never know what is going to happen. The world's a better place than we hear about it on the news.
yeah,
Yeah, I will say I never realized that telling my story would be one of the most meaningful acts I would have done in my life because it did lead to other people receiving transplants. And um, I've seen the best of humanity come out when it comes to organ donation, not just for me, but for other people, because there is a lot, like Brad was saying, sad stuff on the news. And then when you think of organ transplant, the best of humanity comes out.
yeah. And you've created advocates, Brad, like you were talking about people when you tell people your story, there are other people who get intrigued. So it's like we're spreading that message. I've got people now that are going through the evaluation process because of learning my story. And so it's just spreading. And there's so many people out there who are in need that great, let's go out there, shout it from the mountaintops. Let's get the message out so that there everybody has a second chance.
Yeah. And I happen to be one of those rarities that had my transplant fail within the first year. And statistically, it's just very unlikely for that to happen. And I will even say, though, statistically, my kidneys did recover after my transplant, which is very statistically unlikely. They're not
Hey,
recovering enough to keep me from needing a future transplant, but I'm at least off dialysis and needing a transplant for now. So there's been so many miracles along the way. But with that being said, the hard question I wanted to ask Brad was, what was it like for you when my transplant failed?
Yeah, it was hard. It sucked. Um, that the news was really hard. However, not as hard for me as it was for you, of course. And that's something that I always kept in mind is that I went into this knowing that it could happen, not thinking that it would, but it was, it's possible. And um, what what has kept me knowing that what I did was still the right thing to do and that I would do it again is to see how you are doing and how amazingly, as you said, your native kidneys have recovered to the point where you don't need to be on dialysis and you have time before you will need another transplant. And that would not have happened but for the kidney that I donated, you would have still been on dialysis. You
Yeah.
would have been in rough shape like you were beforehand. And so amazing, even though it was only a few months, it gave enough time for your native kidneys to have a break. And so that is what keeps me going and keeps me motivated that I did the right thing because of your health, your current health.
Yeah, it means the world to
It's pretty amazing to think about that. I mean, Brad,
me.
your kidney was so powerful that it kickstarted Danielle's native kidneys. I mean, that's wild and awesome.
Yeah, the surgeon came out to tell, I don't know if it was Danielle's family. My wife was there with them.
Yeah.
Spent like 5 hours with them that day at the hospital and said the kidney was pink and beautiful. And apparently they took a picture of it, which they saw. I asked to see it. I still have not seen the picture of the kidney.
Yeah, I got to see one of mine. It's pretty wild. Yeah, keep asking for it.
Yeah.
Renee, I know you started the evaluation process at when I was receiving my transplant, but when you gave my kidney, my transplant had failed, and you still gave me a voucher.
Yeah, yeah.
What made
You know,
you decide to do that?
I think for me, like I talked about a little bit earlier, was once I realized the opportunity and and knew that this could be part of my legacy, it was it was a no-brainer that I was going to move forward. But then when yours failed, it was almost even more motivating because I can't imagine what it must have been like to get that taste of a bit of normalcy again and to feel uh that energy. And so for me, it was like, oh my, like, I want you to have that. And I don't want that to be something that you had to think about how am I going to go through this campaign again and all of the work to do it because it is work.
Yeah.
And so for me, it was motivating. And what was really cool is not only could I help you, but I can help somebody else. Because through the process we did, since I did a non-directed donation, is I was able to donate to somebody I didn't know to be able to have you as a voucher holder. So when you are ready, you can move forward quickly with getting that transplant. And that, wow, I got to help two people in the process, which is pretty amazing.
It is. It is. And you said something, Renee, that really sticks out is the part of feeling really good. Um, when I received Brad's kidney, it was the best I had felt in over a year. It wasn't like before when I had my kidneys working, but gosh, did it feel really good and to be able to have the energy for my son. It was the first time in a year where I could really be with him and give the energy I wanted to him. And even if I couldn't pick him up, I had support with him when I had my transplant because I wasn't allowed to lift. It was amazing how I was able to just be so present. And when I was on dialysis, it was really hard. It was really hard. And when my transplant failed, I don't have the energy that I did. I'm running at about 22% kidney function. It's nothing like dialysis, and luckily my brain is still okay, but my body cannot keep up, and that part's really challenging. And so the reason why I believe in kidney transplantation and living donation is because even that taste for the several months that I had it was amazing. And I would want it for anybody. And that's why I do this, even though my transplant failed. I really would want it for anybody who could have it. So I'm curious for you both, what would you want people to know? Like whether it be for a donor or for a recipient, that's not commonly spoken about.
I think for me is, I've been learning more about the hesitation about asking people to be evaluated, to consider donating. And I think there's a lot of different things that come into play with that for sure. You've talked about, once you put it out there into the world, people know, are they going to treat you different? But from the aspect of fears of not putting people through pain, or I wouldn't do it myself, or any of those sorts of things, don't make that decision for other people, would be my suggestion to those that are looking for a living donor. Put it out there and let them make that decision, because we all have different needs, desires, ways to create legacy, whatever it might be. So I guess don't take that opportunity away from somebody like me who found this to be an incredible opportunity and gift.
And and I'll take that from the donor side. I think this is something that people don't think about or are not aware of, um, or don't want to do because they have their, own fears of certain things happening, including failure. And um, what I would say is that um, this is really a unique opportunity to give life to someone else while you are still alive. And that's just incredibly rare to be able to do that and to see that the impact that it has on not just a person, but their entire family, their friends. Um, it's immeasurable. And it's really incredible to be able to do something like that. And to help someone and really to help someone without wanting anything in return, because I never did.
Yeah. Yeah.
I am, I have no words. I have no words. I'm so moved by this conversation and you both. You are my heroes.
It's been a an honor, a joy. Yeah, there's, you know, recovery and a little bit of pain, but I think, as Brad and I have both said, we would do it all again.
So in a weird way, that the Danielle, the date of our surgeries was the day that three matriarchs in my family all passed away in different years.
Oh, wow.
My grandmother, her sister, my great aunt, and then another woman who was a cousin but was really like a great aunt as well. All of them were, grew up together, lived together in New Orleans, and on different years they passed away on the same day, on February 18th. And that was the day of our surgery. And that to me has a lot of meaning.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting because February 18th stands out in my mind forever as that day marks the day that changed my life, but also the way I look at humanity. Um, I don't think I was cynical before, but I would get down sometimes. I mean, I tend to be the glasses half full type of person, but there would be times that I would get overwhelmed by news
Yeah.
or the world. And I just remember, Brad, seeing your family at the hospital. We all saw each other in the waiting room and we were all hanging out. And then even after our surgeries, it was like a party. Nobody thinks of going to the hospital and having a party, but it just in many ways felt like a little party. Even for Renee, when we were at the hospital for you, while everybody was concerned, we were all just, all so grateful. There's just nothing like it in the world. I
I
don't I
yeah,
don't think there are any words to describe it.
I can think of two really good reasons to want to go to a hospital, having a baby and this. And I don't know if there's anything else.
Yeah, yeah, good point.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Ah. Well, thank you all so much for being willing for me to have this conversation with you, to ask these burning questions that I've been dying to ask. And it's just been such a pleasure. You both are my heroes, and I cannot thank you enough. And what I would say to anybody listening who is debating on asking for a donor, I would say just do it. Even you never know who it's going to impact, who's going to step up. It might not just be you, it might be multiple people. So for that, I would say do it. And I would say for those who are thinking about donating, um, there really is no pressure in terms of learning more when you reach out to a transplant center, or if you're working with a nonprofit to learn more. Their goal is really just to be supportive and answer questions. They really want to make sure that if someone's a living donor, that they are 100% volunteering and willing to do so. So I'm going to leave everybody with that. And then, Brad or Renee, do you have any last words?
Say same thing. Do it. Give people like me the opportunity to give back in some important and impactful way. And for those considering being a donor, get the education. There's a lot of myths out there, and truly, I've gone back to 100% normal, like before, like it never even occurred. And so you truly can share your spare, and you continue to live the life you did before. So
Yeah,
definitely get
and I would just
educated.
add, do your research for a donor, do your research, talk to your doctor, talk to people who you trust, talk to a local transplant center. I obviously can't speak for all of them, but I can tell you where I went. I was very comfortable that they were looking out for my interests. They had a separate team who handles donors and handles recipients, and there is a wall between them. I never felt pressured. I never felt like, this is something that they wanted me to do because they were looking to have a surgery or to have income coming in or anything like that. I never felt that, not once. It was always what was best for me and to make sure that I knew what I was getting into and that I was doing this for the right reasons. That was 100% how they handled it. So I would just tell people if you're considering it, do your research and look into it and talk to the people that you trust and go from there.
Thank you both. You two are my heroes. And to everybody out there, happy Kidney Month.
Thanks. Thanks, Danielle.
Bye,
Thanks,
everyone.
Brad.